There is a specific kind of cold that exists only in hospitals. It is not merely a temperature, but a frequency, a sterile vibration that hums beneath the fluorescent lights and whispers that you are no longer a person, but a problem to be solved. I lay on the narrow gurney in the preoperative holding area of St. Jude's Hospital, shivering under a sheet that felt as thin as tissue paper. I am Elias. I am 74 years old. For 40 years, I was a structural engineer. I made my fortune understanding how things break. I designed bridges that could withstand earthquakes, skyscrapers that could sway in a hurricane without snapping, and foundations that refused to crack under pressure. I understood load-bearing capacities. I understood stress fractures. I built things to last. But lying there, waiting for a routine pacemaker adjustment, I felt flimsier than a house of cards in a gale. "It's just a tune-up, Dad," my son, David, said. He was standing by the rail of the bed, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "Dr. Elias said you'll be out by noon." "The club?" I repeated, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. "We aren't celebrating, Elias," my daughter-in-law Clara corrected, scrolling through her phone with a manicured thumb. "We're networking. David needs to be seen with the city councilman today. This surgery is just—" She didn't look at me. She rarely looked at me anymore. Since my wife, Martha, passed 3 years ago, Clara had stopped pretending to care about the man who had paid for her wedding, her house, and her lifestyle. She only cared about the trust fund that I still controlled. I looked at David. He was my boy. I remembered holding him when he was small enough to fit in the crook of my arm. I remember teaching him to ride a bike, running alongside him until my lungs burned. Now he wore a suit that cost $3,000 and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Do you care?" I asked softly. David sighed, a sound of exasperation he didn't bother to hide. "Don't start, Dad. You know I care, but business doesn't stop just because your heart rhythm is a little off." They were here, physically, but emotionally they were already at brunch. They were already moving on. I had felt the distance growing for years, widening like a crack in a concrete pylon that goes ignored until the whole structure is compromised. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just grief, just the stress of his failing real estate ventures. But in the quiet of my large, empty house, I knew the truth. They were waiting. They were waiting for the structure to fail. The double doors at the end of the hallway swung open. A young orderly in blue scrubs walked toward us with a clipboard. The orderly asked. My heart gave a strange, uneven thump. Fear. It was an emotion I wasn't used to. I had walked beams 50 stories up without a harness in my youth. But this surrender of control terrified me. The orderly unlocked the wheels of the gurney. "David," I said, reaching out a hand. I wanted him to squeeze it. I wanted him to say he loved me. I wanted to feel a tether to the world of the living. David didn't take my hand. He tapped a final text message and slid his phone into his pocket. "See you on the other side, Dad," he said. His voice was flat. It didn't sound like a wish. It sounded like a prediction. Clara offered a tight grimace of a smile. As the orderly wheeled me away, I twisted my neck to look back. They weren't watching me leave. They were huddled together, whispering, their heads bent close in a conspiracy of silence. The operating theater was blindingly bright. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. It was a factory where they repaired human machines. Dr. Elias was waiting for me. Clara had insisted on him. "He's the best," she had said. I looked at him now, hovering over me as the nurses strapped my arms down. He looked unwell. His skin was sallow, sweating under the surgical cap. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. I didn't know then about the gambling debts. I didn't know about the loan sharks who had threatened to break his fingers if he didn't come up with $500,000 by Friday. I only saw a man who looked like he was about to vomit. "Dr. Elias," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He jumped slightly at the sound of my voice. He looked down at me. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red. "Mr. Vance?" he croaked. "Yes." He signaled the anesthesiologist.
The mask was brought down over my nose and mouth. The rubber smelled sweet and cloying. Dr. Elias leaned in close to check the fit of the mask. He leaned so close I could smell the stale coffee and bile on his breath. He put his hand on my shoulder, not to comfort me, but to steady himself. Then he whispered. It was so quiet the nurses couldn't hear it over the beeping of the monitors, but I heard it. I heard it as clearly as a bell tolling.
"I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying desolation. My eyes snapped open. I tried to inhale, to scream, to ask what he meant, to demand he stop. They have my daughter. Who? What was happening? But the gas hit me. It wasn't a drift into sleep. It was a sledgehammer to the skull. I tried to scream, to rip the mask off, to fight, but the paralytic was already in my veins. My arms were lead. My tongue was stone. I was freezing in a darkness that felt final, a crushing weight that pinned my soul to the table while my body went limp. If you've ever looked into the eyes of a professional and seen only fear, if you've ever realized too late that your safety net was actually a trap, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next wasn't medical malpractice. It was an assassination attempt disguised as a complication. Darkness. Absolute, suffocating darkness. Time ceased to exist. It could have been minutes. It could have been years. I floated in a void where the only sensation was the cold. Then, sound returned. It started as a dull roar, like the ocean in a shell, and sharpened into the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a monitor. I was alive. I tried to open my eyes. Nothing happened. I tried to take a deep breath. My chest didn't move. I felt the mechanical hiss and click of a ventilator pushing air into my lungs. Panic, raw and primal, exploded in my mind. I screamed until my throat should have bled. "Help me! I'm awake! Something is wrong!" But no sound came out. My lips didn't move. My jaw didn't unclench. I was locked in. I was a consciousness trapped in a coffin of flesh. The complication Dr. Elias had induced wasn't death, it was a brainstem stroke. Precise, calculated, designed to sever the connection between my mind and my body, leaving me a vegetable to the outside world, but keeping my heart beating. Then I heard them. "He's stable," David's voice said. He sounded bored. But the neurologist said there's zero higher function. The stroke destroyed the bridge to the motor cortex. "Perfect," Clara replied. Her voice was crisp, satisfied, the tone she used when she found a designer bag on sale. Dr. Elias did exactly what we paid for. The power of attorney triggers upon incapacitation. We don't have to wait for probate. I lay there, screaming in the silence of my own skull. David, David, I'm here. I'm your father. Don't do this." I felt a hand on my arm. It wasn't a comforting touch. It was David, checking my wrist for a watch I wasn't wearing. "We need to list the house immediately," David said. "The market is softening," Clara asked. "I'm the trustee now," David said. "God, he looks pathetic," Clara muttered. "He's not a father anymore, Clara," David said cold. "He's an ATM with a pulse. Let's go." I listened to their footsteps fade away. I listened to the door close. I was alone. I was a structural engineer. I had spent my life calculating loads and stresses. I knew that every material had a breaking point, and lying there, betrayed by the blood in my veins and the blood of my loins, I felt my sanity beginning to fracture. They had murdered me without stopping my heart. They had buried me alive in the open air. Hours passed, days maybe. The only measure of time was the shift change of the nurses. Most of them ignored me. They talked over me, changed my IV bags, and wiped my face with the indifference one shows to furniture. But the night shift brought Sarah. She was young, with a soft voice and gentle hands. She smelled of vanilla and fatigue. She talked to her patients, even the ones who couldn't answer. "Hi, Elias," she whispered on her third night. She fluffed my pillow. She adjusted the sheets so they weren't bunching under my back. She hummed a melody I recognized, an old Beatles song. She paused by the bedside table. David had left a photo of Martha there, a prop to make him look like a grieving son to the hospital staff. She was beautiful,
Sarah said softly. Martha. The name hit me like a physical blow. The grief, the love, the longing, it surged through me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Beep, 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 beep. The monitor spiked. Sarah paused. She looked at the screen. She looked down at me. Mister, she whispered. She leaned in close. Her eyes searched my frozen face. Mister, she asked. Mr. Vance, if you can hear me, I need you to do something. You can't move, I know that. But your heart, she squeezed my shoulder. Think about running, she whispered urgently. Think about running a race. Make your heart beat faster. I focused. I focused everything I had left. I closed my mind's eye and pictured the Boston Marathon I ran when I was 40. I felt the pavement under my feet. I felt the burn in my lungs. I felt the adrenaline of the finish line. Run, Elias, run.
Beep, 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 beep. The monitor went wild. 120 beats per minute. 130. Sarah gasped. She spun around and locked the door to the room. She came back to the bed. Her hands were shaking. She didn't call the doctor. She didn't call the nurses' station. She knew Dr. Elias was the one who did this. She was smart. I know you're in there, she whispered, her voice fierce. And I know they're lying about your test results. I saw your son in the hallway. She brushed the hair off my forehead. We have to be careful, she said. I wanted to weep. I wanted to fall to my knees and thank God for this girl. But all I could do was keep my heart racing, a drumbeat of gratitude in the silence. 2 days later, the midpoint twist arrived. Sarah came in during her break. She was carrying a tablet. She looked pale, angry. She checked the hallway, then pulled the curtain around my bed. You need to hear this, she said. I recorded this on my phone 10 minutes ago. They were arguing near the vending machines. She placed the tablet near my ear and pressed play. The audio was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. You keep him alive for 30 days, David hissed on the recording. Dr. Elias's voice replied, sounding desperate. David, the risk. David snapped. That's the clause in the life insurance policy. It's a $5 million policy. If he dies on the table, it's a mandatory investigation, an autopsy. If he dies of complications 30 days later, it's ruled natural causes. There was a pause. Keep him breathing until the 1st of the month, David commanded. Keep the fluids going. Keep the ventilator on. Then, on day 31, you tell the ethics board there's no hope. We pull the plug. The recording ended. I felt a coldness spread through me that had nothing to do with the paralysis. It was a glacial, crystalline rage. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was farming my death. He was keeping me as a prisoner in my own rotting body to satisfy an insurance clause. I had 30 days. 30 days before they murdered me. 30 days to find a way to scream. Sarah looked at me. We don't have much time, Elias. I can't go to the police yet. It's just audio. They'll claim it's doctored. They have power of attorney. They can fire me. She gripped my hand. You need to move, she said. You need to show the world you are in there, not just your heart. A finger, an eyelid. I stared at the ceiling. I focused on my right hand. My right index finger. I was an engineer. I knew about connections. I knew that even if the main bridge is destroyed, there are auxiliary cables. There are back roads. I visualized the nerve. I visualized the signal traveling from my brain, bypassing the wreckage of my brainstem, finding a new path through the dark. Move, I commanded. Move. I poured every ounce of my willpower, every year of my discipline, every drop of my rage into that one single joint. It felt like trying to lift a skyscraper with a piece of thread. Hours passed. Sarah sat by my side,
holding my hand, whispering encouragement. "Come on, Elias." And then a spark. It was tiny, microscopic, a ghost of a sensation. My index finger twitched. It was no more than a millimeter, but Sarah felt it. She gasped. She looked at my hand. "Do it again," she breathed. I focused. I screamed internally, "Move!" Twitch. Sarah began to cry. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, and the pain was glorious. "We're going to fight them, Elias," she promised, wiping her eyes. "We're going to burn them down." I didn't have eyelids I could control yet. I couldn't blink. But I could feel, I could hate, and I could plan. I focused on my heart. I thought about David. I thought about Clara. I thought about the bridge I was going to build out of this hell and the weight I was going to drop on top of them. Beep, 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 beep. The monitor spiked.
He's gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My chest heaved. I blinked, once, twice, 3 times, clearing the gritty dryness from my eyes. Sarah stood over me. She looked tired, her uniform slightly rumpled, but her eyes were fierce. She had quit her job at St. Jude's the day after David transferred me. She had applied here the next morning. David had hired her immediately to be my private duty nurse because she was young, she was quiet, and he thought she was stupid. He thought he was getting a discount on a babysitter for a corpse. He didn't know she was my hands and my voice. "We have work to do," Sarah said, pulling the chair close to the bed. "Your left leg is showing signs of atrophy. We need to stimulate the muscle. And then..." The physical therapy was agony. It wasn't the sharp, stabbing pain of a broken bone. It was the dull, sickening ache of trying to send a signal down a wire that had been cut. I was a structural engineer. I knew about load paths. I knew that if a bridge loses a pylon, you have to redistribute the weight. My brain was the bridge. The stroke had taken out the main highway. I had to build back roads. "Push," I commanded my left foot. "Push" against her hand. Nothing happened. "Push, damn you." I focused until sweat beaded on my forehead. I visualized the electrical impulse traveling down my spine, bypassing the dead zone, finding a new route through the nervous system. A twitch, a tiny, pathetic jerk of the big toe. "Good," Sarah whispered, massaging the calf. Again, 10 times Elias. The rage was my fuel. If I didn't have the rage, I would have died in that bed. After the therapy, Sarah opened her backpack. She pulled out a folder of papers she had swiped from David's briefcase when he had left it in the room to take a call yesterday. "It's bad, Elias," she said softly. "Read it," I tried to say. The sound came out as a slur, a garbled noise trapped in my throat. I closed my eyes and focused on my tongue, forcing it to obey. She unfolded a document. "Liquidation of assets," she read. "Vintage car collection, sold to a private buyer in Dubai for..." "Elias, this is pennies on the dollar. He sold the '67 Shelby for $40,000. I felt a spike of anger, but I pushed it down. Cars were metal. Metal could be replaced. "The house," she continued, "listed on the MLS yesterday. Quick sale. My house. The house I built for Martha. The house where I taught David to walk." Sarah hesitated. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "Elias, I'm sorry." My heart stopped. "Barnaby," I choked out. Barnaby was a golden retriever mix. an old, arthritic soul who had slept at the foot of my bed every night since Martha died. He was the only thing in that big house that looked at me with unconditional love. "Surrender form," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Reason. Owner deceased." Deceased. I wasn't even dead yet, and he had thrown my dog away like garbage. A sound ripped out of my throat. It was a guttural, animal noise of pure grief. "He's in the shelter," Sarah said quickly, grabbing my hand. I called them. "He's on a hold. He's safe, Elias. I promise. I paid the fees myself. He's waiting for you." That was the moment the steel hardened. Before, I wanted justice. Now, I wanted war. The flashbacks came at night, when the hospice was quiet, and the only sound was the gurgle of the oxygen machine. I remembered David as a boy, sitting at the kitchen table with a model bridge kit I had bought him. He had glued the pieces together wrong, rushing to finish. When I pointed out the structural weakness, he had shrugged. "It looks fine on the outside, Dad." I realized then, lying in the dark, that the cracks in his character were always there. The shortcuts, the lies, the need for instant gratification. I had ignored them because I loved him. I had reinforced his weak points with my own money, my own influence, shoring up a structure that was destined to collapse. I had built a monster, and now he was dismantling me. Day 25. I regained the ability to blink on command. Then, the ability to squeeze a hand. Then, the ability to slur a single coherent word. We kept it secret. It was our weapon. When David visited, usually in the late afternoon after his business lunches, I went limp. I let my jaw slacken. I stared blankly at the wall, letting my eyes glaze over. "Hey, Dad," David said, walking in with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't sit. He paced. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "Just checking in," he said to my unmoving face. "Things are moving along. The house goes into escrow tomorrow. Cash buyer. You'd be proud of the deal I cut. Well, maybe not you." He laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Clara picked out a yacht," he continued, walking to the window and looking out at the parking lot. "We're thinking the Mediterranean for the summer. Once the insurance payout clears next week, we're gone."
No more gray skies. No more. He turned to look at me. He leaned over the bed. "You had a good run, old man," he whispered. "But you held on to the reins too long. You should have just given it to me." He patted my cheek. It took every ounce of my willpower not to bite his finger off. He didn't see Sarah standing in the shadows of the bathroom doorway. He didn't see the red light of the digital recorder taped to the underside of the bed frame. He confessed his sins to a man he thought was a husk, unaware that the husk was recording every syllable. Day 29. The climax. The end-of-life meeting. The room felt small, suffocated by the presence of 4 people. David stood at the foot of the bed, wearing a black suit. He was already dressed for the funeral. Clara stood in the corner, holding a tissue to dry eyes, performing her grief for the audience. The audience was Mr. Henderson and Dr. Elias. Mr. Henderson was my family lawyer, an honest man. He looked devastated, his shoulders slumped, clutching his briefcase like a shield. Dr. Elias looked like he was about to explode. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. He refused to look at the bed. Elias, Mr. Henderson asked, his voice thick with emotion. It hasn't even been a full month. Elias was a fighter. He wouldn't want to give up this easily. He's gone, Henderson, David said, his voice dropping to a somber, practiced register. Dr. Harris confirmed it this morning. There's no brain activity. The reflex tests were negative. David looked at the surgeon. Dr. Harris flinched. He looked at David, then at the floor. Yes, he mumbled. The neurological damage is catastrophic, irreversible. It is... We can't let him suffer, Clara sniffled. Mr. Henderson sighed. He pulled a document from his briefcase. This is the order, he said heavily, to remove the feeding tube and the ventilator. Once signed, the hospice staff will... David reached for the pen. His hand didn't shake. He looked eager. I'm signing the order, David said. The sound was awful. It sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. It was weak, wet, and raspy, but in that silent room, it sounded like a thunderclap. David dropped the pen. It clattered onto the bedside table. Clara screamed, a short, sharp yelp of terror. Mr. Henderson spun around, his eyes going wide. Elias, Mr. Henderson gasped. Elias, David shouted, his face going pale. It's just air escaping.
He's spasming! I opened my eyes. I locked them onto David. I poured all the rage, all the betrayal, all the sorrow of the last month into that stare. I turned my head, slowly, mechanically, like a turret traversing a target. It took every ounce of strength I had. My muscles screamed, my vision blurred, but I lifted my right hand. It trembled violently, shaking like a leaf in a storm, but I forced it up. I pointed a finger at Dr. Harris. He, I rasped. I took a breath, the air whistling in my throat. He. The room froze. Kill, I wheezed. Dr. Harris let out a whimpering sound and backed into the wall. This is impossible, David yelled, lunging toward the bed. He's hallucinating, I said, my voice gaining volume from the sheer adrenaline flooding my system. I looked toward the corner. Sarah, I commanded, play. Sarah stepped forward from the shadows. She looked small next to David, but she stood like a giant. She placed a Bluetooth speaker on the bedside table. She pressed play. The room was instantly filled with David's voice, recorded 3 weeks ago in the hospital hallway. It was crisp, clear, and damning. You keep him alive for 30 days. That's the clause in the life insurance. If he dies during surgery, it's an investigation. If he dies of complications a month later, it's natural causes. Keep him breathing until the 1st of the month. The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Henderson's face turned from shock to a shade of red that looked dangerous. He looked at the recorder. He looked at David. Then he turned to the sweating surgeon. Henderson demanded. His voice was a growl. Dr. Harris collapsed. He didn't just sit down. His legs gave out. He fell into the visitor chair, burying his face in his hands. They made me, he sobbed. They knew about the sharks. They have my daughter's school schedule. David, screamed. David lunged for the speaker. He wanted to destroy the evidence. But Sarah blocked him. She stepped in front of the table, her arms crossed. The police are already in the lobby, David, she said calmly. I called them 10 minutes ago. You little bitch, David snarled, raising his hand. Don't, a deep voice boomed. It was Henderson. He stepped between them, chest heaving. The door burst open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a detective I recognized from the news. David Vance, Clara Vance, the detective said. The fallout was absolute. David didn't fight. The air seemed to go out of him.
He slumped, his arrogance evaporating instantly. Clara began to wail, a high-pitched, keening sound as the cuffs clicked onto her wrists. "David!" she screamed, pointing at her husband with bound hands. "He made me do it. I wanted to wait." David looked at me. His eyes were wide with terror. He looked like the boy who had broken the window playing baseball, begging for leniency. "Dad," he pleaded. "Dad, please, tell them. It was a mistake." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the son I had protected, the son I had loved more than my own life. I thought about Barnaby in the shelter. I thought about the house. I thought about the 30 days of darkness. You built your life on a cracked foundation, David, I whispered. They dragged them out. I watched them go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. I felt a heavy, profound sadness, like watching a building I had designed crumble into dust. 6 months later, the sun was setting over the river, casting long, golden shadows across the water. I sat in my wheelchair on the back porch of my house. I wasn't walking yet, not fully, but I could stand with a cane. The house was off the market. Henderson had frozen the sale the day of the arrest. The vintage cars were gone, but I had bought a new one, a practical one. At my feet, a golden head rested on my slipper. Barnaby let out a contented sigh, chasing rabbits in his sleep. His coat was shining again. He had forgiven me for his time in the cage faster than I had forgiven myself. The screen door opened. Sarah walked out, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She was wearing scrubs, but they were different now. They had the logo of the University Medical School. I was paying her tuition. It was the best investment I had ever made. Dr. Elias pled guilty today, Sarah said, handing me the glass. 10 years? I asked, taking a sip. 25 to life, she said. I nodded. I looked out at the horizon. In the distance, I could see the silhouette of the Vance Memorial Bridge, the first major project I had ever led engineered. It spanned the river, connecting the city to the suburbs. It had stood for 30 years. It had weathered storms, floods, and earthquakes. It stood because the foundation was solid. It stood because it was honest. I looked at my hands. They were scarred. They trembled slightly when I held the glass. But they were mine. I had reclaimed them from the darkness. I took a deep breath of the fresh evening air.
It didn't smell of antiseptic or fear. It smelled of pine and river water and dog fur. It tasted like justice.